The moment my future father-in-law's hand started shaking and the glass slipped out of it, I knew the dinner I'd been dreading was about to become something else entirely. But that came at the very end of the night, before the shattered glass, before the silence, before the look on his face when he finally understood who'd been sitting at his table all evening. There was just me, standing on a porch in a town I'd never been to, holding a grocery store pie because I hadn't known what else to bring. Let me back up. I'm a trauma surgeon. I run the surgical department at a Level I trauma center in Cleveland, which means that when somebody gets pulled out of a car wreck on I-90 at 2 in the morning, or a kid swallows something he shouldn't have, or a construction worker falls off a scaffold, the people who save them answer to me. I've been doing this for 11 years. I'm 34. And in the 3 years I'd been with Daniel, I'd never once told him exactly what that meant. It's not that I lied. I want to be clear about that because I've replayed it enough times to know the difference. When we met, I told him I worked at the hospital. That was true. When he asked what I did, I said I was a doctor. Also true. He assumed surgeon eventually because I'd come home smelling like the OR and fall asleep on the couch at 7. But he never asked whether I ran anything, and I never offered it up. And somewhere in there the not saying became a habit. I stopped noticing. I think the real reason is uglier than that, and it took me a long time to admit it. People treat you differently when they find out. Not all of them, but enough. The second somebody hears chief of surgery, there's this little recalibration that happens behind their eyes. They sit up straighter, they start performing, or sometimes they get smaller. Like they've decided they have nothing worth saying to me. I met Daniel at a hardware store of all places, both of us standing in the paint aisle arguing internally about the difference between eggshell and satin. He helped me. He didn't know me as anything. For the first time in years, somebody was just talking to me like I was a regular tired woman who didn't know which paint to buy. I held on to that for as long as I could, so when he told me his parents wanted to meet me, finally, after 3 years and a ring, I didn't think much about the gap in what they knew. Daniel grew up in a small town about 90 minutes south of the city, the kind of place where the same family has run the diner for 40 years, and everybody knows whose truck that is parked outside the hardware store. He described his parents the way a lot of people describe their parents, good people, hard-working, set in their ways. Just so you know, he said in the car on the way down, my dad can be a little old-fashioned. About work, about what people do. He worked the line at the GM plant for 31 years. He's proud of it. Just don't take it personally if he's a little gruff. I won't, I said. And here's the part I'm not proud of. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I made a decision. I'd already mentioned to Daniel, weeks earlier, that I worked in the surgical wing and left it there. And he told his parents I was a doctor at the hospital. That was all they knew, a doctor. Vague enough, and as we pulled off the highway and onto a county road, I thought, I'm just going to let them think what they think. I want to see it. I want to see how these people treat someone they've decided is ordinary. I'm a little ashamed of how much I wanted to know. Their house was a tidy little ranch with white siding and a flag out front. A basketball hoop over the garage that hadn't seen a ball in years. Daniel's mother opened the door before we even knocked. She was small and warm and smelled like vanilla and oven heat, and she hugged me right away, called me honey, took the pie out of my hands like she'd been waiting all day to do exactly that. His father was standing behind her in the living room with a beer, a big man gone soft in the middle, grey crew cut, a handshake that tested mine. So you're the doctor, he said. I am, I said. He nodded like I'd confirmed something he already suspected, and not in a good way. The house was full of the life Daniel had grown up in. Little league trophies on a shelf. A framed photo of him in a graduation gown. His mother's needlepoint on the walls, one that said BLS this home. There was a recliner that was clearly his father's, angled toward a TV that was too big for the room, and the whole place had that smell of a Sunday roast that's been in the oven since church let out. We sat. His mother brought out a tray of crackers and a cheese ball she'd clearly made herself, and for a little while it was fine. They asked about the drive. They asked how Daniel was liking his new job. He's a project manager for a commercial flooring company. Good work. Steady. His father talked about his knees and his pension and the way the plant had changed before he retired. Then his father set his beer down on the coaster and looked at me. So what kind of doctor are you? You giving out flu shots, that kind of thing? I work in surgery, I said. Surgery? He repeated it like he was tanning it over. So you're, what, helping out in there, handing the doctors their tools? I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my face easy. Something like that. My cousin's girl is a nurse, he said, nodding, settling back into his recliner like the matter was decided. Up at the regional. Good money in that now. His mother chimed in from the kitchen doorway. Oh, nursing's wonderful. So caring. You must be on your feet all day, poor thing. I am, I said. That part was true. And I watched something happen at that moment that I'd seen 100 times before, except this time in reverse. They relaxed. They placed me. I was a hospital girl, a helper, somebody's nurse who'd snagged their son, and now they knew exactly how to talk to me. The temperature of the room changed by about 3 degrees, and not toward warmth. Dinner was at 6 on the dot. The table was set nice, the good plates, his mother told me, the ones from her wedding. There was a roast and mashed potatoes and green beans that had clearly been cooking since the Carter administration, and a basket of those soft dinner rolls from the grocery store. Daniel's father said grace. I bowed my head with everyone else, and then the small things started. They were so small, I want you to understand how small they were. Because that's the whole point. His mother served everyone. She filled Daniel's plate first, then her husband's. Then she looked at me and said, "Why don't you go ahead and pass these around, honey? You're closer." And handed me the bowl of green beans. So I served everyone the green beans. Fine, I didn't mind. I served everyone. His father started talking about the neighbors, the Henderson's boy who'd just made foreman, the Klein girl who'd opened her own salon and was doing real well for herself, real well. He had a whole catalogue of who'd made something of themselves, and he went through it the way some men go through box scores. Daniel laughed at the right spots. His mother said, "Isn't that wonderful, at the right spots? Nobody asked me anything." At one point his mother turned to me and asked, in a kind voice, the kind voice was almost worse, "And do you think you'll keep working after you two get married? It's just so hard, you know, balancing it all. Daniel's going to want a family." "I like my work," I said. "Of course you do," she said, patting my hand. "But there's plenty of time to figure that out. I thought about the resident I'd talked off a ledge the week before, the one who'd lost a patient and was sitting in the stairwell at midnight wondering if she was cut out for any of it. I thought about the budget meeting where I'd fought the administration to keep a second trauma bay staffed overnight, and the man whose life that decision had probably already saved without his ever knowing. I thought about the fact that on Tuesday I'd had my hands inside a 19-year-old's chest, holding his heart, deciding whether he lived. "I think I'll keep working," I said. His mother smiled and moved on. The thing that got me, and I keep coming back to this, was that Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't correct them. He didn't say, "Actually, Mom, she's a surgeon." He just ate his potatoes and laughed at his father's stories and let it ride. I understood it in a way. You don't fight your parents at their own dinner table. He'd grown up swallowing things at that table. But I sat there feeling something cold settle into me, and it wasn't anger exactly, it was clarity. This is how they treat somebody they've decided doesn't matter. And they were being nice. That was the part I couldn't shake. This was their nice there'd each. His father was on his 3rd beer when he leaned back and gave me a look that I knew was meant to be friendly. "You know, no offense," he said, which is what people say right before the offense. "But I always told Danny he should marry somebody who can be there for him. My wife, God love her, she stayed home, raised this boy, kept this house. That's real work too. People forget that. A man comes home, he needs his house to be a home, not somebody too busy to make him dinner. Bob, his mother said, mild. I'm just saying. He spread his hands. No offense to the working girls, but there's something to be said for it. None taken, I said. And I meant it, in the sense that I had stopped expecting anything else from him that evening. We were almost through dinner. His mother had brought out coffee. Daniel had relaxed into the role of the favoured son home for Sunday dinner, and I had relaxed into the role of the quiet girl they were tolerating, and I had genuinely started to think that this was simply how the night would end. I'd have learned what I wanted to learn. I'd have my answer. And I'd have to figure out on the drive home what that answer meant for me and Daniel. Then his father reached for his coffee cup and his hand wasn't working right. I noticed it before anyone else did, because noticing is my job. The cup tilted. His fingers weren't gripping. He brought his other hand up to steady it, and that one was slow too, and when he tried to say something, I think he was going to make a joke about it, about being clumsy. The words came out wrong. Soft on one side. Slurred, like a man who'd had a lot more than 3 beers. Bob? His mother said. Bob, what? The glass of water by his plate went over when his arm swept sideways, and it shattered on the floor, and that's the sound that stayed with me, that sharp, bright crack in that quiet little dining room. I was already up. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second, I was the quiet girl at the end of the table, and the next, I had 2 fingers on the side of his neck, and I was looking at his face, really looking, and the whole left side of it had gone slack like a curtain coming down. Bob, look at me. Can you smile for me? Squeeze my hands. Both hands, squeeze. What's happening? His mother was saying. He's having a stroke, I said. I heard my own voice come out flat and level, and absolutely certain, the voice I use in the trauma bay, the one that makes a room go still. Daniel, call 911 right now. Tell them suspected acute stroke, adult male 60s onset. I looked at the clock on the wall, an old plastic clock shaped like a rooster on set within the last minute. Tell them I'm a surgeon and I need them moving now. Go. Daniel had his phone out. His hands were shaking. His mother had both of hers over her mouth. I got his father out of the recliner and onto the floor, flat on his side. And I was talking to him the whole time, low and steady, the way I talk to anyone who's scared and trapped inside a body that's betraying them. You're okay. I've got you. We're getting you help. I need you to stay with me, Bob. Stay right here with me. Is he? His mother couldn't finish it. What's his name? I asked her, even though I knew it. I needed her doing something, answering questions, not spiraling. Robert. Daniel. Any blood thinners? Does he take anything? Aspirin, Coumadin, anything? His blood pressure pills he takes, I don't. Get me the bottle. Kitchen, bathroom, wherever it is, bring me everything he takes. Go now. She ran. It gave her something to do besides watch her husband's face fall apart. I knelt there on the floor of that little dining room with the broken glass and the smell of the roast, and I held that man's hand and I watched the clock, because with a stroke the clock is everything. Every minute his brain, and I counted and I kept him talking, kept his head turned, watched his breathing. Daniel was on the phone giving the address, and his voice broke once, and I reached up without looking and squeezed his ankle, just to let him know I was there. I had this. His dad was in good hands. The squad got there in 9 minutes. When the EMS crew came through the door, I gave them everything in 30 seconds flat time of onset, presentation, the meds his wife had brought me, his rough weight, the works, and I watched the lead medic's eyes change as he listened. That recalibration I'd been avoiding my whole life, except this time I didn't care about it at all. I rode in front of the ambulance in my own car with Daniel white-knuckled in the passenger seat, and I called ahead to the regional, and because I know people everywhere, I made sure the stroke team was standing at the door when we pulled in. His father got the clot-busting drug inside the window. The neurologist told us later that another 20 minutes and it would have been a different story. A wheelchair story. A nursing home story. Instead, 3 days later, Bob was sitting up in a hospital bed with a slightly crooked smile, complaining about the food, mostly himself again. It was in that hospital room that the second thing happened. The thing this story is really about. I'd gone to check on him on my own in the afternoon in my white coat because I'd come straight from my own hospital, and I forgot, honestly, that I had it on. The coat with my name embroidered over the pocket. My name, and underneath it, the title. His mother saw it first. She'd been sitting by the bed doing her needlepoint, and she looked up at me and her eyes went to the embroidery and stopped there, and her mouth opened a little and nothing came out. Bob followed her look. He read it. He read it again, the way people do when the words won't rearrange themselves into something they can manage. Then he set down the pudding cup he was holding, and he looked up at me, and his crooked face did something complicated, and he said, slow, because the stroke had taken some of his words, Chief of Surgery. Yes, I said. You run the whole department. I do. The room got very quiet. Somewhere down the hall a cart squeaked by. At dinner, he said. I told you. About the working girls. He stopped. His eyes were wet, and I don't think it was just the stroke. I told you a man needs his dinner made for him. To you, too. He gestured at the coat, at me, at the whole impossible fact of me. I'll be damned. It's okay, I said. It is not okay. His voice cracked. You were sitting at my table and I was talking to you like you were. He couldn't finish it. His wife put her hand on his arm. And here's the thing I have to be honest about. The thing that surprised even me. I didn't feel triumphant. I'd thought I would. Some small, mean part of me, the part that had let them think I was a nurse, had been waiting all my life for a moment like this one. The big reveal. The comeuppance. And now that it was here, with this frightened old man crying in a hospital bed about the way he'd talked to me over green beans, all I felt was tired and a little sad. Because the apology, real as it was, wasn't really for the right thing. He was sorry he'd talked that way to a surgeon. He wasn't sorry he'd talked that way to a nurse, and those are not the same, and I think you know they're not. It got strange after that, in the way I'd seen coming my whole life. They overcorrected. When I came to the house again, and his mother insisted, over and over, that I come to the house, she brought out the good cups, the ones with the gold rims that I suspect had never held coffee before. She asked my opinion on things, on the news, on her sister's gallbladder, on a mole on her arm that she'd been worried about, and there was a deference in it that felt like a wall, not a door. Bob, recovering, took to introducing me to his friends as my son's fiancé, the surgeon, runs the whole department up in Cleveland. He'd watch their faces do the recalibration, and he'd glow a little, and I'd stand there feeling like a trophy on a shelf next to his son's little league stuff. One Sunday, his mother had clearly spent all morning cooking, and she fluttered around me asking if everything was all right. Was the chicken too dry? Did I usually eat fancier than this? And I finally set down my fork and said gently, It's perfect. It's exactly the kind of dinner I love. You don't have to do anything different. Oh, she said, and her face did something I'll remember for a long time, because for just a second I saw that she understood and was ashamed and didn't know what to do with it. I want you to feel welcome. I felt welcome the first time I lied to be kind, and then I decided not to be kind because I'd been kind my whole career and I was tired of it. No, I didn't. The first time you handed me the green beans to pass and asked if I'd quit my job. This is better, but it's better because of my title, not because of me. She didn't have an answer for that. There isn't one. Daniel and I had it out in the car that night, in the driveway, the engine off, the porch light throwing yellow across the dashboard. "Why didn't you just tell them?" he said. "From the start, none of this would have happened. My dad feels terrible." "Your dad feels terrible that he disrespected a surgeon," I said. "Does he feel terrible that he disrespected a nurse?" Daniel was quiet. "That's the question," I said. "That's the whole question. You let them think it," he said. "And there was an edge in it. And he was right to have an edge in it. You set them up. You sat there and let my dad make a fool of himself." "Yes," I said, "because I had. And I'm not proud of that. But here's what I need you to sit with, Daniel. You knew what I do. You've watched me come home wrecked from a 16-hour day. You've held me at 2 a.m. when I lost somebody. And you sat at that table and let your father call me a working girl and didn't say one word." His jaw worked. "You don't challenge my dad at his table. You don't get it. That's how it is in my family." "I know it is," I said. "I'm not asking you to have yelled at him. I'm asking why it was so easy for you to let me sit there as nobody. Because I think part of you liked it. I think part of you liked that for once. I was small at the table and you weren't the one married to the surgeon. I think it was comfortable. That landed. I watched it land. He didn't deny it, and that not denying told me more than any answer would have. We didn't break up." I want to be honest about that, because the clean version of this story is the one where I take off the ring and drive into the sunset, and that's not what happened. What happened is harder, and I think more true. We sat in that car for a long time, and then Daniel said, quietly, "I think I've got some stuff to figure out about myself." And I said, "Me too." And we went home and we started doing the slow, ugly work of figuring it out. He went to see his parents alone that week. He told me about it after. He told his father, in that same living room, that he'd been ashamed at the dinner table and hadn't understood why until now, and that the shame wasn't about me being a surgeon, it was about him being small. Bob, who was still relearning some of his words, listened and then said the thing that made me think there might be hope for all of us. He said, "I spent my whole life thinking the measure of a man was what he made, the plant, the pension, the number on the check. And then slow, working for it, turns out the measure of a man is whether his wife's got to make his dinner before he'll respect her." He looked at his son when he said it. But I think he was talking to himself. 50 years too late and right on time. Bob and I are okay now. Better than okay, honestly. He calls me sometimes with questions he's too embarrassed to ask his own doctor, and I answer them, and we talk. And somewhere in there the deference wore off. And what was left was just a stubborn old man, and the woman who happened to be there when his brain tried to kill him. He told me once, gruff, looking at his coffee instead of at me, that he tells everyone now that he was wrong about something important, late in life, and that it's the most useful thing he's got left to teach. I told him that was probably worth more than the pension. He laughed. The crooked half of his face laughs slower than the rest now, and I find I don't mind that at all. Daniel and I got married last fall. Small. His parents were there. I didn't wear a coat with my name on it. I was just a woman in a dress marrying a man who, after a lot of work, had learned how to stand next to me without measuring the distance. His father walked slow, but he walked, and at the reception he stood up, this man who told me a wife should make her husband's dinner, and he raised a glass with the hand the stroke had nearly taken, and he said, "I almost missed who she was. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait for somebody to prove they matter. I've thought a lot about why I did it. Why I let them think I was nobody. I told myself it was an experiment, that I wanted to see the truth of them, and that's part of it. But the deeper truth is that I was tired of being a title before I was a person. I wanted, for one evening, to be treated like the least important person in the room, just to see if anyone would treat me well anyway. They didn't. Not until they had a reason to. But here's what I've landed on, and it's not bitter. I promise you it's not. The way people treat you when they think you're nobody, that's not a verdict on you. It's information about them. And what you do with that information is the only part that's actually yours. You can let it make you hard, or you can let it teach you exactly who's worth keeping close and who's still got some growing to do, and whether you've got the patience to wait while they do it. I waited. It was worth it. Most days I think it was. So let me ask you the thing I've been carrying around since that night with the broken glass. Have you ever sat at a table where people had decided you were nobody and watched them become someone else entirely the moment they found out they were wrong? I'd really like to know I'm not the only one. Tell me, I'll be reading every single one. The dinner didn't fall apart because Bob was a cruel man. It fell apart because of a habit he'd practiced for 60 years and never once stopped to look at. He measured people by their paycheck, by the number on the line, by whether they made something the world called impressive. And when he decided I was a nurse who'd married up, that math told him exactly how much of his attention I deserved. The green beans he handed me to pass, the working girl's comment, the question about whether I quit my job for Daniel. None of that was random. It was the natural result of a man who'd never been forced to question the yardstick he'd been using his whole life. What changed him wasn't my title. I want to be honest about that, because it would be a prettier story if the white coat had done the work. It didn't. What changed him was a stroke at his own table and the slow, humbling months afterward when he had to decide whether he was the kind of man who could admit out loud that he'd been wrong. That choice, to face an ugly truth about himself instead of hiding from it, is the only thing that actually mended us. Not the apology to the surgeon, the reckoning with himself. I think about Daniel too, and the comfort he found in my being small at that table. He didn't grow out of that because I scolded him. He grew because he was willing to sit in his own discomfort long enough to see it clearly. That kind of clear sight is rare. Most people would rather stay comfortable than understand themselves. And my part in it, letting them believe I was nobody, taught me the value of watching before I react. If I'd announced myself the moment Bob got smug, I'd have won the argument and learned nothing. By staying quiet, I got to see who these people really were when they thought no one important was in the room. That's the most useful information you'll ever get about anyone, and you only get it by being patient enough to let them show you. So here's what I'd tell you. Whoever you are, listening to this in your kitchen or your car, pay attention to how people treat the person they think can't do anything for them. That tells you everything. Build the kind of decency in yourself that doesn't switch on when a title walks in. Sharpen the kind of judgment that reads people by their small choices, not their big ones. And find the steadiness to wait through the slow, unglamorous work of letting someone grow, because the people worth keeping almost never arrive finished. Bob got there. Daniel got there. It took a near tragedy and a lot of patience, but they got there. And the woman who waited turned out to be stronger than the one who could have just slammed the door.